Hello again, and welcome to my third review. This, of course, will be the third episode of Season 1 of Game of Thrones. Now, as I'm doing this, it's very early in the morning, and it's raining really hard. I don't know how much of that you can hear. My throat's still really sore, so we'll see how this goes. But we're going to try to do our best here. Okay, now, as I said, it's the third episode of Season 1 Game of Thrones. The episode is called Lord Snow. And a little bit about the name of the episode. It really seems to only apply to one part of the episode, when a lot of the names apply to many different parts of the episodes, as you'll see in the future. But as for the name of the episode, it ends up being Alistair Thorne's nickname for Jon Snow, and it's a sarcastic use of Lord and Snow, because Snow is, well, obviously Lord is a title, and Snow is one of the names given to bastards in the Seven Kingdoms. Each of the kingdoms, you get a name depending on what part of the kingdom you were born in. Snow is for the north, and we might go into a little bit about the other nicknames, but just so you know, in case this is the first time watching it, that's what the name of the episode means. It's a sarcastic pairing of the title Lord with a bastard last name, just because bastards are never lords. So, just a little bit of a behind-the-scenes thing on that. Like I said, I do these like you're watching them for the first time, even though I know most of you probably are not, but I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who might be watching it for the first time. The way I do my reviews is I retell the episode basically with my thoughts and some of the background that is pertinent to that part of the story added when it comes up, because I don't want to give away anything, even though we're in season 4 currently. But like I said, you might be watching it for the first time, so I don't want to ruin anything for you. So, all of that being said, we'll move on to our first scene in the third episode of Season 1. And as you can see by the background picture here, which is going to change in a little bit, that is our first exterior view of King's Landing. We saw a little bit of the inside of King's Landing, or the throne room, in the first episode. It's our first view of the actual city, King's Landing, as Ned Stark and his daughters and their Septa Mordain arrive there for Ned to begin his wonderful new job as Hand of the King. So here we go. They are arriving at King's Landing, and before Ned even gets in the door, one of the servants, for lack of a better term, he's not really a named character, and I don't think we ever see him again, but he comes out to tell Ned, hey, the meeting's going on, come inside, do you want to change into something more appropriate? So he's already looking down at Ned as, one of those grubby northerners, but I mean, that's how I took it anyway. So he's already getting told there's his first meeting for his new job. The small council meeting is what they're called, as in the meeting of the advisors to the king. So he goes inside, and we get a little bit of a better view of our throne room. And when he gets inside, who's there but Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer. Now, as you probably noticed by now, Ned is all about what's right, and Jaime's part of the Kingsguard, and he took an oath to protect his king, and then he killed his king. Despite the circumstances around that, he broke an oath, and that's what Ned's brain immediately goes to when he sees Jaime standing in front of the throne, because last time they were both in that room and Jaime was standing in front of the throne was right after he had killed his king. So, we go into a little bit of a backstory. Jaime starting to hint at why he had killed King Aerys, and he reminds Ned, sorry, my throat is very sore, he reminds Ned that this king that I killed, he murdered your brother and your father. And actually, he burnt his father alive with wildfire. Rickard, Ned's father, he burned him alive with wildfire in his armor, basically cooked him. And as Ned's father Rickard was burning, he had his oldest brother Brandon. He had a collar around his throat with a chain, and he was saying, "Oh, well, if you can reach him, you can save him." But of course, by trying to reach his father, he strangled himself. So that's actually the Mad King's idea of fun, and how Brandon and Rickard met their fate. Just a little bit of a backstory there. So yeah, the Mad King was mad. Moving on, we go to our very first small council meeting, and we meet some of the king's advisors. We meet Lord Varys, who we later find out is the spy master of whispers. We meet Lord Peter Baelish, also known as Littlefinger. I'll probably refer to him as Littlefinger. I always tend to call him that, but his name is Lord Peter Baelish, and that's Peter with a Y, everybody. And that's Littlefinger. We also meet Grand Maester Pycelle. And he, like I said, the maesters are sort of like doctors and the people that run most of the day-to-day duties of most noble households. This is Grand Maester Pycelle, and the reason he's Grand Maester is because he's running the royal household, so he gets a better title, I guess. And we also see Renly, who is one of Robert's two younger brothers. He's the youngest one, Renly Baratheon. And it seems like Varys is very civil and polite to Ned, and Renly and him seem to be getting along pretty well. Baelish, he mentions a story about how he used to be, basically, he had a thing for Catelyn when they were growing up, because Baelish actually grew up with Catelyn and Lysa Tully. He was, I believe, their father's ward, something along those lines. So Baelish actually used to have some feelings for Catelyn. And as the show goes on, you'll see maybe those aren't really in the past after all. Also, Pycelle, he does his crotchety old man act, which you'll see is grating. But anyway, that's our first view of the small council, where Ned finds out that the kingdom's in debt, and he's not very happy about that. But we'll get more into that later. Then we move on to our favorite people from the last episode. Sorry, sarcasm. This is Queen Cersei and Prince Joffrey. And Cersei is bandaging her son's injuries. His bite from the wolf. And she's telling him, "Oh, well, you fought off the dire wolf and killed it." And Joffrey's like, "Well, that's not what happened." And she basically tells him, when you're king, the truth will be whatever you want it to be, regardless of what it actually is. So that's Cersei's view on being king. Make it up, tell people the truth, and they'll believe it, or they have to believe it. Motherly advice. And she also, Joffrey's obviously not happy with Sansa seeing behind the mask, so to speak, and what kind of person he is. And he's asking, do I have to marry her? And she's like, yes, you have to marry her. But you can sleep with whoever you want. You're going to be the king. You're my darling boy, and you can have whatever you want, and all that. You get a real view of the way Cersei is greatly responsible for Joffrey being such a terror, spoiled little brat, basically. They also go into a little bit of talking about how he'd just, wipe out the North, send the army to kill them all, and she's like, what army? Because the North is bigger than every other kingdom put together, and if you attack them, you really think they're going to be on your side. So, although Cersei's not the most brilliant character on the show, by a long shot, she's a lot smarter than Joffrey, obviously, which is pretty bad. Then we move on to breakfast with the Stark girls, And Arya is stabbing the table, and Sansa's brooding. They're both very unhappy about what occurred at the end of the last episode with Lady getting killed, and Arya is blaming Sansa, and she hates them all, as she says, and calls Sansa a liar, and obviously all that. She's still ticked off, and Sansa's ticked too, but she's ticked at Ned. Because Ned's the one that killed Lady. Misdirected much, Sansa. But, anyway, there's another... Like I said, I don't usually do book comparisons. But there's another line that they cut out in the scene where Sansa tells Arya that she should be dead instead of Lady. I mean, I feel bad for the wolf, but really, Sansa? Your sister should be dead instead of your dog. Wolf, whatever. Like I said, Sansa is Catelyn's daughter, and I don't know why they're trying to make them come off as nicer than they are, because, like, really? They were bitches. Really. Sansa and Catelyn both. The way they treated Arya and Jon. But like I said, that's just my opinion. I don't know why the show's trying to make them nicer than they were, but whatever. Anyway, Ned comes in and sends Arya away, and the Septa's he's acting like a beast and whatever, and sends Arya away, and Ned sits down with Sansa and gives her a doll and tries to mend fences, and Sansa's being, not interested in dolls. She's just not having any of it. She's still upset with Ned for killing Lady when really it was her fault, technically. I mean, yeah, it was Joffrey and Cersei's fault, but Sansa did not help. But like I said, that's just my opinion. Anyway, then we go back. Arya's in her room, and she's playing with her sword and needle, and Ned comes in. And this is the first time Ned actually sees this sword. He didn't know she had it, because remember, Jon's the one that gave that to her. And she apparently hid it pretty well, because Ned didn't even know she had the sword, and he's looking at her like, where did you get that? But, Arya doesn't rat out Jon. She doesn't say anything about where she got the sword. Ned notices it's from the blacksmith at Winterfell. I believe his name is Micken. So he kind of has an idea of where she got it. But they sit down. He's trying to talk to her about her spat with Sansa, and tries to explain to her that Sansa is betrothed to Joffrey, and she has to take Joffrey's side, even when he's wrong. And in reference to the whole thing that happened with the wolf. And Arya comes back with, how can you let her marry someone like that, though? From the mouth of babes. That's all I can say. Yeah, Ned, how can you let Sansa marry somebody like that? But, I mean, of course they're trying to ally their houses, and that's what it's all about, the whole politics of it, but, I'm sure it makes Ned think. And we also see that Arya is blaming, she was blaming Sansa in the last scene, but really she's blaming herself. She thinks that it's her fault that her friend got killed, because after all, she asked him to go practice swords with her, and that's what led to the whole confrontation. So she's taking the blame herself about what happened to Micah. And Ned tries to explain to her that it's not her fault. And he explains to her, or tries to explain, that they've come to a dangerous place, is one of the lines he has. So Ned is really starting to see that things are not good with the way the royal family is right now. And he says, we've come to a dangerous place. We can't be fighting a war amongst ourselves. And in the end, he turns out and lets her keep the sword. And he's got the line before he leaves, try not to stab your sister with it. I thought that was funny. I wouldn't blame her if she did. But anyway, sorry, not liking Sansa. So anyway, that is Ned realizing that Arya now has a sword, and hey, she might need it with the way things are going in this place. Alright, now back to the other Stark child. We get to Bran, who is in bed, and has found out that he cannot ever walk again. He's going to be crippled for life. And his, I guess she might be a septa, or maybe just an older servant lady. They don't really make it too clear. Her name's Old Nan. And she's like the oldest living lady in Westeros, it seems. Actually, the actress has since died. But this is Old Nan, and she is telling Bran. Well, Bran says he likes the scary stories, and she starts telling him all these stories about the Long Night. Now, that's actually a thing. That's actually a period of time that happened in the history of Westeros. It was like the darkest time in their history, and there's a lot of story about that, but she's referring to that period in time. And she's talking about the White Walkers and the Children of the Forest and spiders as big as dogs and women smothering their babies because they were going to starve and all this stuff. Basically, she's making it clear that winter is not going to be fun. Winter itself, because in the show, the seasons last for years, and you never know how many years it's going to be, summer, spring, winter, or fall. And they say that if the summer is long, the winter is going to be even longer. And the longer the winter, the colder it gets and the darker it gets and the more people that end up dying. You get the idea that winter is a bad thing. And Nan, she's telling all these stories about these supernatural things that nobody seems to believe in, but you get the idea that she seems to believe in them, or at least it comes across that way. Interesting. And Rob obviously doesn't believe either. That's a big theme. Most of the people do not believe in all this stuff that we've already seen a little bit of. And the other thing you get it from this is that winter is a bad thing that everybody's very afraid of. And now we get back to Catelyn and Roderick arriving at King's Landing to tell Ned about the attempt on Bran's life and the dagger. And when they get there, I mean, they're supposed to be, incognito. Nobody's supposed to know about them going there. And she says she hasn't been in the capital for 9 years, so who'd recognize her anyway? Because nobody recognized her before. But it turns out somebody already knows they're there. And they actually request their appearance or company. She goes up these stairs and finds out who has requested her presence, and it turns out it is Peter Baelish, Littlefinger. And he has them taken to his brothel. He runs all the brothels in the city. Yeah. He's also the master of coin for the king, the one that's in charge of the money, and keep in mind they're 6 million in debt. Good job, Peter. He blames that on the king and says, oh, it's his fault we're in debt, and we just do what we're told. But anyway, he runs the brothels and brings Catelyn there, and she's ticked off about that because it's sort of an insult to her to be brought to a place like that, a house of ill repute, because she's a noble lady. And Varys comes in, and they're talking about what happened, because it seems like these two already know that there was an attempt on Bran's life. I mean, Varys even mentions, I'm so sorry about your hands, so they already know everything that's been going on in Winterfell, even though they're kingdoms away. Interesting. Yeah, he also says his little birds are everywhere. Little birds is his reference to all his spies, because he is the master of whispers, the spy master. So, Catelyn asks Varys, since, well, you're the master of spies, you know everything, who does this dagger belong to? And Varys says he doesn't know who the dagger belongs to. And Varys knows everything, so that's kind of weird in itself. And then Baelish says that it used to belong to him, and then he lost it in a bet with Tyrion Lannister. So that's Baelish's story about who the dagger belongs to. So according to Kat, there's her proof. The Lannisters did it because she trusts Baelish, and they were childhood friends, so she thinks that he's, couldn't possibly be untrustworthy. Sorry if you can hear my sarcasm. I'm not a fan of Baelish. Alright, so we go back to the Wall, and we get our first look at the men from the Night's Watch training. And we see that Jon he's kicking all their butts, basically. And the guy that's training them is Alistair Thorne, and he's really got a hate on for Jon. Really bad. That's still, they don't really explain too much about that. I mean, there's some theories that it's because he used to be loyal to the Targaryens and Jon's father fought the Targaryens, but I don't know, he really hates Jon, which is kind of strange. But, so Jon is a better fighter than them, and they're all ticked about that, and Alistair's not impressed at all, and even though Jon kicked all their butts. And we get our first look at Tyrion talking to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Jeor Mormont. Does that name sound familiar? It should. Jeor Mormont. That's Jeor. Anyway, he's referred to as the Old Bear, and he is Jorah, Jorah. Jorah Mormont's father, Jorah, the one who's with Dany. So, you get some connections there. Some family connections, because remember I said Jorah is obviously from the north. Well, there's his dad at the wall, running everything. Alright, so we go back to Ned receiving the message late. Pycelle insinuates that he had the message for a while and forgot to give it to him. But he gets the message that Bran is awake again, but that he can't walk anymore. And Baelish comes in and says, maybe you'd like to share the information with your wife. And Ned's like, well, my wife's in Winterfell. What are you talking about? And Baelish, Littlefinger, he's like, oh, is she? Snarky, Littlefinger. Get used to that. So he tells Ned, and Catelyn's there, and takes him to the brothel where Catelyn is, and Ned's ticked off that he brought her there too, because, don't be bringing a noble lady to a brothel. It's it's kind of an insult, really. So he grabs Baelish and almost strangles him, and thinks he's lying, and he would never bring Catelyn there, because, and then, as you can see, Catelyn pokes her out over the balcony. She is there. So Ned goes inside, and Littlefinger's like, Starks, quick temper, slow minds, whatever, Baelish. But anyway, so Ned knows Catelyn's there, and he goes to talk to her. Then we go back to the wall. Love the little quick scenes. We go back to the wall, and the other three Night's Watch men, Pip, who's like the skinny, dark-haired one, Gren, who's got the lighter hair, and Rast, who's like the stocky, black-haired one. They're annoyed with the fact that Jon was better than them and basically kicked all their butts when they were training. And they're trying to, pick on him like a brawl at recess or something. And Tyrion comes in, and he's like, I'm looking at all your faces. I'm going to remember every one of you, and maybe I should tell my sister, the queen, that you're trying to kill off people even though you're supposed to be working together and defending it. Not that the queen would care, but they don't know that. So anyway, Tyrion comes in, and they stop attacking Jon, threatening him, whatever. And Tyrion points out that they all came from really bad circumstances. Well, not all of them. He only talks about Pip and Gren. One, or they were stealing to feed their families, or got abandoned by their family. Just basically the hard luck stories that they really had no choice, and they're not happy about being there either. And Jon points out, well, everybody knew that this was a place just full of criminals and outcasts, but no one told me except you. And so Tyrion points out, that they have all had bad luck in their lives, and Jon actually had it better than a lot of them. And he got trained, by a master at arms, and he was basically a rich kid. Even though he was illegitimate, he was a rich kid. And he also is the vehicle by which Jon finds out that Bran's awake again, and that he'll never walk. So anyway, another Tyrion-Jon chat where Tyrion's trying to point out to Jon, get the chip off your shoulder. Other people have had it worse. And, deal with it and move on. So, we then move back to the discussion in the brothel about the dagger, and Catelyn telling Ned that the dagger supposedly belonged to Tyrion Lannister, and says that Peter has promised to help them tell the truth, and she trusts him, and he'd never betray her because they were friends when they were kids. Okay, Cat. Anyway, so you can see Cat thinks that Baelish will help them prove what happened, so Ned can tell Robert. Moving on. We go back to the Lannister twins, who've also found out that Bran's awake, and they're obviously worried about, does he remember anything? Is he going to tell anyone? And, again, Cersei seems way more concerned than Jaime. She has a lot more to lose, I guess. Well, I guess they both have a lot to lose, like their lives. But, so they're talking about, will Bran tell anybody? And Jaime's like, so what? He's 10. We can outwit him. We'll make up something that you think they're going to believe. And if they don't believe us, I'll kill Robert and anybody else until it's just us. Which goes back to what Cersei had told Joffrey. Anyone who's not us is the enemy, is what Cersei had said to Joffrey. And Jaime's reiterating that here. Kind of explains their love life, doesn't it? They don't trust anybody who's not in their family. Not that that's really an acceptable explanation, but you can see how it came to pass. Okay, anyway, back to Ned and Catelyn saying goodbye to each other. And Catelyn's ticked. She wants to go do something about this. In her mind, the case is solved. The Lannisters did it. We need to do something. And Ned, he's trying to, be the logical one here, the practical one, opposed to what Littlefinger said about the Starks before, about the quick temper, slow minds. But Ned's saying, we need to get proof. We need to get real solid proof. And when we get the proof, I will tell Robert and hope that he's the man I once knew. And the fact that he said that, and if you look at the end of the last episode, and the fact that Robert's run the kingdom into debt and doesn't care, Ned knows he's not the man he once knew. He's being optimistic, to put it mildly. But yeah, so he's going to try to find proof and hope that Robert believes him and does something about it. Good luck, Ned. So then they say goodbye to each other. You see the longing looks between them, and Catelyn riding off. And that's their goodbye. So, Ned's off on his trying to prove the Lannisters did it crusade, and Catelyn's heading back towards Winterfell. Alright, now although Catelyn's upset, so who knows, she's just gonna wait and be patient, because she's, her kid almost got killed. And, we move on to, King Robert, speaking with the leader of the Kingsguard. This is the actual leader of the Kingsguard at this point in time. I had said in an earlier video that Jaime is the leader of the Kingsguard, but at this point in time, Jaime is not the leader of the Kingsguard. He's maybe second in command, something. But Barristan Selmy, also known as Barristan the Bold, he is known to be one of the greatest fighters in all of Westeros. And he's the leader of the Kingsguard. And he used to actually serve King Aerys. And Ned, I think it was Ned, got Robert to pardon him and put him on the Kingsguard, or put him in charge of the Kingsguard, but again, like he was with Aerys. But Robert doesn't let him go to the small council meetings. Not that Robert cares to go either, but he doesn't let the leader of the Kingsguard is usually a part of the small council, but he doesn't let Barristan go because he used to serve Aerys, so that's his punishment for having served the previous king, but still being there. We also meet Lancel Lannister. I like Lancel. Not his character, the actor. I like the actor. Lancel is Cersei's nephew. Or no, not nephew, cousin. She is, Lancel is their father's brother's son. Their father, Tywin, who we get our first mention of in this episode, his brother Kevin is Lancel's father, but Cersei has installed her cousin Lancel as the king's steward, squire, wine boy, whatever. He's picking on Lancel a lot, and all the Lannisters kind of transferring his hatred for Cersei and Jaime onto Lancel, even though Lancel just sitting there serving the wine. But anyway, in this scene, they're discussing their first kills and all that. And Robert asks Jaime, "What did the Mad King say when you stabbed him in the back?" And again, Jaime says, Robert asks, "What were the Mad King's last words?" And Jaime says, same thing he'd been saying for hours: "Burn them all." So you get the idea that the Mad King really was mad. And although Jaime did kill his king, the king wasn't a very nice guy. So, was it really that bad of a thing to do? According to the kingdom, yes. But Robert forgave him enough to put him back in the Kingsguard. So anyway, we go, speaking of the Mad King, we go to his daughter. We have Dany and Jorah, and Dany is looking upset at the way the Dothraki treat their slaves, and goes back to, Dany has a real deep-seated hatred for slavery because of the way she was raised. And she asks, Jorah, how you could do that, and all that. So we get to we get a little insight into Dany's hatred for the slaveries, and and she tells them all to stop. And Jorah says, "For how long?" She says, "Until I command them otherwise." And he says, "Oh, you're learning to talk like a queen." And she says, "Not a queen, a Khaleesi." So Dany's tired, and she wants to stop, and she wanders off, I guess, maybe to sit down, rest, whatever. And Viserys is all ticked off that he's been ordered to stop by his sister, because the way he treated his sister. And he said, "I don't take orders from some horse lord slut." And technically she's the queen of the Dothraki right now. And so Rakero, we get our first introduction to Rakero. He is one of the only Dothraki, I think, that speaks English other than the handmaidens. And he's like, "Do you want us to kill him?" Because, he talked back to our queen. He should be killed. That's, the way they see it. And she's like, "No, don't hurt him." And she's like, corrects herself. And she's like, "Tell him that I don't want my brother harmed." So she's still, even though Viserys has treated her like crap, and she still has some hope in her heart that, well, he's my brother and I shouldn't kill him, even though he's a scumbag and he's always treated me like dirt. So she saves Viserys, even though the Dothraki wanted to kill him for just talking back to her. Go Dothraki. Jorah sees that there's a bit of a divide happening between Daenerys and Viserys, and Viserys is getting really resentful that Dany's got more power than him. In this particular situation, she does, because she's the queen of the Dothraki people. I mean, yeah, she's a woman, she still doesn't have a lot of power, but she's got more power than this guy, even though, in his mind, he's the king of the Seven Kingdoms, but he's not officially the king of the Seven Kingdoms, but he still expects people to treat him like he is. And, actually, I think his nickname, I don't know if they ever mentioned it in the show, but his nickname in the book is the Beggar Prince, because everything he got, he had to ask other people for. But anyway, so that's a little spat between Dany and Viserys, and Dany's still hoping that, Viserys is her brother, and maybe there's hope for him, maybe he'll come around, maybe he'll stop being such a dick. Sorry, I don't like Viserys. Okay, but I don't know how anybody could like Viserys, but hey, you never know. Anyway, moving back to the north, we get several, just quick scenes of what the wall looks like, and the elevator that they've got and all this, and they're just basically giving you an idea, some of the scenery of the wall, as Jon's taken the elevator up to the top of the wall. That's actually one of the places they patrol, watching the other side of the wall from the top, another view of the big wall. And he's going up to talk to his Uncle Benjen, who is about to go out beyond the wall on patrol. Sorry, very sore throat. So, Benjen is the first ranger, which means he's like the best ranger there is. And as I said in the first episode, rangers are the ones that go on patrol and see what's really out there. So Benjen is going out on patrol beyond the wall, and they say later in the episode that he'll be out there for weeks or months or something. He's going to be gone for a while, because he's going to go and patrol the area north of the wall and find out what dangers are out there. I mean, most of the dangers have always been the wildlings, the primitive people who were there before the wall got put up, and still their ancestors lived there when the wall was first built, and so they're the descendants of the people that lived there before the wall was put up. And John's saying, okay, well, what I say is sorry, it's very early. The wildlings were mostly the threat, but now, as you saw in the first episode, there's some other threats out there. And if you really want to go into it, go back and listen to Old Nan's story again, if you really want to know about some other things that are out there. So, of course, most of the people don't believe in that. The really old people seem to believe, and the Night's Watch. I mean, even here, Benjen says, I don't want to believe the disturbing reports I've heard. But you get the idea he does believe, because he's heard too much and seen too much, so he knows there's something out there that's more than just the wildlings. So, John's saying, oh, I'm ready, I'll go with you. And Benjen's like, no, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not a ranger yet, you haven't even taken your oath. And John says, well, I'm better than everybody. He's like, no, you're not better than anybody until you earn it. Kind of repeating what Tyrion had said earlier, about how you're not really better, you just have, a better life. And I think it's interesting that Benjen and Tyrion are saying something similar, because in this scene, Benjen and Tyrion don't seem to be getting along. The start of the scene is actually Yoren. That's Yoren. Strange name, but hey. He's actually on a show with the guy that plays Lancel. Interesting side note. They're on another show together. But anyway, Yoren is the guy who's responsible for going and finding new recruits for the Night's Watch. He goes to King's Landing and gets people from the dungeons and brings them back to the wall. So Yoren and Tyrion are having a chat. I call it the Yoren and Tyrion comedy duo, because they're both pretty funny. So they're laughing it up, and then Benjen comes in, and you get the idea Benjen really doesn't like Tyrion. And I don't think that it's because he has anything against Tyrion other than Tyrion's last name. And they mention here that he's like, well, do you think the Night's Watch are a joke? Because when he came in, they were laughing. He's like, most of these men are going to be dead within weeks. And, they could die just from sickness or cold. I mean, these boys are going to die, and you're sitting here laughing and joking and having a good old time. So Benjen's kind of offended by just Tyrion being a Lannister. So you get that they don't get along really well, and let's see, what else goes on in this scene? Let's see. That we get the scene where Tyrion goes, I don't know what I've done to offend you. And Ben's like, anything anybody says before but doesn't mean anything. So I like that line a lot. We also get a little peek at, Tyrion's like, I don't believe that there's all these creatures in the dark, these evil creatures. So even though Tyrion's really smart, again, he doesn't believe in these things either. It's the big fatal flaw amongst the people in the show. But anyway, the scene ends with Tyrion and Yoren deciding to travel together. Now we go back to Daenerys learning more Dothraki. And here we find out that Dany is actually pregnant. So that actually goes back to what Robert said in the last episode about, soon she's going to have an heir, and that worries him even more. So Dany found out she's pregnant. So, might be another Targaryen on the way. So Robert's not going to be happy about that, is he? Um, and we have a little discussion between Jorah and Ricardo discussing the different armor and weaponry used by the Western Knights as opposed to the Dothraki. And Jorah is trying to point out the advantage of the armor, or still dresses, as the Dothraki call them, because they don't have a word for armor. They don't have a word for thank you. There's a lot of things they don't have a word for. Gives you kind of an idea of their culture. But anyway, they're discussing the difference, and Ricardo's like, well, armor slows you down. And Jorah's like, yes, but it protects you. So they're having a little mini debate. They're not really arguing, but, pointing out the differences between the way the Westerners fight and the way the Dothraki fight. And we get our first view of an Arach. A-R-A-K-H, the Arach. Kind of looks like a scythe, sickle, sword combination. That's the Dothraki weapon of choice. And Eerie comes in and tells them Dany wants to eat something different tonight, and they're saying, we don't have anything different. What are you talking about? And then, to try to sway them to find something different for her to eat, because they've been living on horse meat, basically. She says the Khaleesi, that's what she refers to Dany as, the queen. She says she's pregnant. And, to try to tell him she needs to be healthy here. She has the heir inside her. Khal Drogo's heir. But, and immediately, as soon as he finds out that Dany's pregnant, Jorah is like, I gotta go somewhere. Runs out. Strange. We'll get back to that later. But anyway, we go back to the wall, and Tyrion's watching, and now Jon is actually helping the other guys learn how to fight. He's had a bit of a change of heart, and realizes, yeah, you've had it better than them, and, do something with it. Back to that theme again. Do something with it. And here Tyrion goes back inside, and he's talking to Lord Commander Mormont and Maester Aemon. He's the really old blind guy, Maester Aemon. Another one of the old people who he says, winter is coming and dark things will come with it. I like that line too. So again, the young people do not seem to believe in this stuff. But the older people who've been around longer and the people in the Night's Watch do seem to believe in all the supernatural stuff. So yeah, interesting. So yeah, we're going to hear more about Maester Aemon in later days, but that was our first introduction to him. So then we go back to the happy couple, and Dany tells Khal Drogo that she knows it's a boy. And as you can see, their relationship has changed a lot, and they're a newly married couple expecting their first baby, and everything's happy. That doesn't happen a lot in the show. Don't get used to it. Okay, anyway, then we go back to the wall. There are really quick scenes here. And Tyrion pissing off the edge of the wall like he said he wanted to do. Hey, lifetime dream, go for it, Tyrion. And Jon comes, and they're saying their goodbyes, and at this point, Tyrion had told Jon that Bran woke up, and he asks Tyrion, will you be going through Winterfell as you leave? And Tyrion's like, yeah, there are not a lot of other places to go through from the wall to the rest of the world. And he asks Tyrion to stop and check in on Bran for him, and say I'm thinking about him and all that. So as you can see, Tyrion and Jon has started to deal with his circumstances a bit and try to make the best of them, and they've become friends. Wow, we're already at the last scene of the episode. Now, if you remember, both Jon and Ned have told Arya, you need to learn how to use your sword. And Ned has given in to letting her keep the sword. But, again, he wants her to learn how to use the sword. And so he hires this guy, Syrio Forel. He is her sword fighting teacher, or as he calls himself, her dancing master. Because his style of fighting is called the water dance. He's from Braavos, our first mention of Braavos. And he is like the best swordsman in Braavos. And he has been hired by Ned to teach Arya how to use her sword. Side note, Maisie Williams, who plays Arya, is right-handed. Arya, in the books, is left-handed. Maisie actually agreed to learn all of her fight moves with her left hand to be true to the character. You go, girl. She's amazing. I love Maisie Williams. But anyway, so he's teaching her and saying, you stand side face, you're a smaller target, and a callback, he tells her she's skinny, which is what Jon told her when he gave her the sword. So they're fighting, and, sword fighting. He's trying to teach her how to use the sword, but they're using wooden swords at this point. So, he's telling her, this isn't the way the knights fight. This is more graceful. And, he's a lot of people really like Syrio. He's a fan favorite. He's really cool. He is our first taste of Bravos. And, so they're doing their training montage. And he's always calling her boy. And she's like, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. He's like, boy, girl, you're just a sword. Another great line he's got. So at this point, Ned comes in, and he watches them fight, and he's smiling, and he's like, aw, how cute, they're fighting. And then as he's watching them, you hear the sound change. You hear the wooden swords smacking together, and as Ned is watching, as they're continuing their training, the sound of the wooden swords changes to the sound of actual swords clashing together. And you see the look on Ned's face change, and you can just see him thinking about what he told her before. We've come to a dangerous place. And you can see he almost appears like he's scared that, wow, my daughter might actually need to defend herself, because this is a dangerous place. So he's slowly coming to terms with they're not in a good place, and things could go badly for them, and he's starting to realize that. The way Robert dealt with the wolf issue, and how far in debt he is, and it's really starting to sink in that things may not go well with this new role Ned now has as the hand of this king. He was basically under the thumb of the Lannisters, because they mentioned earlier that I'm not sure if they mentioned in this episode. They did mention that the small council meeting, they mentioned that the kingdom's in debt. And they may not say in this episode, I don't think it's considered a spoiler. If they don't say in this episode, I'm giving something away, but it's not really. They say that they're in debt. The places that they're in debt to is the Iron Bank of Bravos, and another mention of Bravos, and they're also in debt to Cersei's father, Tywin Lannister, which somewhat explains why Robert puts up with the Lannister crap. Because basically Cersei's father, Tywin, who we didn't meet yet, but we got our first mention of him in this episode, because he's the richest man, he's actually been the one supporting the crown all these years. So yeah, that's kind of a big part of why Robert is putting up with the Lannisters. Kingdom don't have no money, but the Lannisters do, and since Cersei Lannister's the queen, well, there you go. So anyway, so Ned is starting to realize that things are not going to be very good here. But in other plot lines, Jon is starting to get a little more comfortable with his situation, and Dany seems to be in a good place right now. So we'll see where it goes from here. This is one of the few episodes that don't end with anybody dying or a big cliffhanger. Don't get used to that. That's all I can say. So anyway, that is that. Episode 3, Lord Snow. And hopefully, I'm not saying today, I'm hoping today, But hopefully soon I'll get the fourth one out to you, so hopefully you'll stick around for that. Thanks all.